the presentation you are making today of this European Investment and Recovery Act is the contribution that we as Liberal and Democrats are making for the revive of the growth in the European Union and for the upcoming initiative that the European Commission is taking in the coming days and the coming weeks. You know that Jean-Claude Juncker has announced that the new Commission should come forward with an investment initiative that should be done in normally next week, in any way before the end of the year. And our group has decided to launch, to contribute to this exercise by showing what could be a European Investment and Recovery Act for the European Union that can create growth inside the Union. But first of all, maybe to show you the need for this investment package or Investment and Recovery Act. If you look to the figures on this slide, you shall see that since the outbreak of the financial crisis, the United States of America has known an economic growth of nearly 6%, 5.9%, while in Europe we got a minus 1.1%. That's quite an enormous difference in these 5 years between 2008 and 2013. And when I look to investment, is exactly the same. The investment in Europe went down minus 14%, while in the United States of America you can say that this investment level was more or less stable, minus 1.4%. So it was minus 14 in the European Union. And also the forecasts for the coming years are going in the same direction. You have a plus 3% of growth foreseen in the United States and plus 1% in 2015 for the European Union. And that's a forecast. We know how it works in reality. In 2000, by the end of the year, or the beginning of next year, you say, yeah, we were a little bit too optimistic with the 1.1%. It shall be less than 1%. So, but again, a huge difference, 1 to 3 in forecast for economic growth. And that doesn't mean that there is not enough money in Europe, because if you look to the reality, that is that there is, for the moment, in the European Union, 600 billion private cash existing, turning around, but not being invested in the economy and in productive activities. So there is absolutely an absolute need to launch what we call a European Investment and Recovery Act. And this Investment and Recovery Act that we are proposing with our group as a contribution to the debate is mainly based on 3 elements, 3 building blocks. And from the beginning, I'm telling you, we need to do them, all 3 of them, at the same time. It's not a question of saying, yeah, well, oh, we're going to do the first building block, but not the third one, or the second, and not the third one. All 3 are necessary. The first is the establishment of a European investment fund with future bounds. The second is the European tax stimulus. Maybe you can come back to, because Bram is going so fast that even I am not capable to follow him. The second part of the act is a European tax stimulus, because we think for households and SMEs, because we think that we need to kickstart the European economy. And to kickstart the European economy, we need that second building block. And then a very important 3, because otherwise 1 and 2 have no sense at all. We have to accelerate market reform in a number of key sectors where we want to invest. And because it has no sense to foresee a huge amount of money to invest in a sector if the sector is still blocked, is not unified, is not harmonized, is not open enough. So let me come back now to every of these building blocks. The first is we want with this act to establish a European European Union investment fund. How should it work? The idea is that today the investment gap in Europe, and I have already indicated that, is more or less 700 billion of euro. 700 billion of euro is the investment gap. And that is going up every year. So the forecasts are that every year this investment gap is growing with 180 billion of euros. So now 700, next year 880, year after that more than 1 trillion, if we do nothing at all. So what we are proposing is that we should create a European investment fund with a forecast with a goal to raise 700 billion euro of private money with the launch of what we call future bonds issued by this European Investment Fund. The European Investment Fund is a separate fund, it's a new fund that is collecting this private money in the market by launching these future bonds, and these bonds, the result of it, the money coming from these bonds, are used to finance a number of projects, investment projects in a lot of areas, mainly in energy, in the digital and telecom sector, in services, and in a number of transport and infrastructure investments. And these future bonds are how to be sure, because that's the key issue naturally, how to be sure that we can collect these 700 billion of euro, because mainly we shall invest them in infrastructure, in digital, in energy grid, and so on. Well, we have two key elements to do so. First of all, the future bonds shall be tax exempt. So no taxation on the income coming from the future bond. And the second and most important element, we're going to put in place for this fund a new risk sharing. Risk sharing by creating a guarantee scheme that guarantees, in fact, this fund. And that guarantee scheme is built up in 3 tranches. The first tranche is a junior tranche. The junior tranche is a tranche that shall be hit at first if, for example, one of these projects go bankrupt. What is always possible, naturally. Hopefully it doesn't happen. Well, the first tranche, the junior tranche, is covered by the member states for an amount of 8% of the total fund. So it's a guarantee. It's not putting capital or money in the fund. It's a guarantee by member state for 8% of the total amount of the fund in a junior tranche. Then there are going to be 2 other tranches, a mezzanine 1 and a mezzanine 2nd tranche. The mezzanine 1 tranche is covered, is guaranteed by the EIB, by the European Investment Bank. Again, it's not money or capital that the EIB has to put in the fund. It's a guarantee given. And the EIB shall be hit as the second if, for example, the guarantee given in the junior tranche is not sufficient enough because a big project is going bankrupt. And then there is a second mezzanine tranche, smaller one, of 4% of the total fund, and that is guaranteed, as you know, by the EFSM, so not the ESM. It is the EFSM, is the communitarian mechanism that we have put in place, and that is guaranteed by the European budget, as you know. So in total, that means that we think that such a fund can be launched, can raise in total 700 billion of private money to finance these investments when there are 2 conditions. The first is that 20% of the fund is guaranteed in a junior and a mezzanine tranche, and we think that's enough, 20%, to be sure that the senior tranche is attractive to private investors. And secondly, naturally, the attractiveness of the fund is also that it should be tax exempt, so that the income coming from such a bond is not taxed in the different member states of the European Union. So that's the way we want to work. And the money, and I come back to this later on in my last part of my intervention, shall be used for specific projects in energy, in digital, in transport, and in services. So the mechanism as it works is very clear. There is no change of the Stability Pact. We are against the fact that we now going to change again for the third or the fourth time the rules of the Stability Pact, manipulating them. For us, I think that's a very bad way to go forward. Secondly, we don't use the ESM because the ESM, the money of the ESM is mainly money of the member states, and we don't touch it. Three, we use a guarantee scheme, so it's not affecting the position on deficits and debt of the member states. It's also very clear. And we don't we don't oblige or we don't change the mandate, for example, of the European Central Bank in this scheme. So that were the caveats we have used. No change of the Stability Pact, no discussion about the mandate of the ECB, don't touch the money of the ESM in this operation. And that creates a fund, in our opinion, that can be very successful because it is tax exempt on the one hand, and because there is a 20% guarantee that can take the first hit if there is a problem with one or other project inside this European Investment Fund. So that's the first thing. Second building block of our proposal is a European tax stimulus. Why is this necessary? Because we are saying and we are thinking that if we start with such a European investment fund, it's going to take quite some time. Let's be honest. It's not because by the end of the year we decide to create and to establish a European fund that automatically 30 days later or 2 months later, yeah, we have concrete investments and money is flowing and investments are being implemented. That's gonna be, it takes some time before this fund is in place, the money is raised, and the projects are launched. And so what we are saying, yeah, we cannot wait 1 year or 16 months before everything is launched. We need, in the midterm, in 2015, at least an additional initiative to kickstart the European economy again. And to kickstart the European economy, our proposal is the following. It's a little bit the same philosophy as the philosophy that is behind the European Investment Fund. What we want to do is that in 2015, for every member state, a number of investment expenditures that are foreseen in the budget of next year, 2015, are taken over, the finance is taken over by the European Investment Bank in the actual financial possibilities that the EIB has. So concretely, that means a number of investment expenditure in France, in Germany, in Belgium, in the different countries of the European Union, because this is a European Union initiative, are taken over, the financing of it, by EIB, by the European Investment Bank, and by the European investment loans. On the two conditions. And the condition is, first of all, that they have to use the space that is created, because that means that there is less government spending on investment by member state, that this space that is created, because the EIB is taking over the financial services of this investment, is used for a tax stimulus, for a reduction of taxation on households and small and medium companies. How that is happening, that is the member states to decide, but it has to concentrate itself on households at the one hand and small and medium companies on the other hand. And Secondly, and that's also the case for, I forgot that to tell you that, and it's very important, in the first building block, all this is naturally under condition that these member states are doing their job, that they are doing the structural reforms that are absolutely necessary in the different member states of the Union, and especially of a number of these member states who are now lacking these structural reforms. So here also is the same philosophy as in the EU fund. It's the EEB. EEB takes over for a 200 billion in 2015 investment expenditure of the national budget under the condition, two conditions. First of all, that they are doing their structural reforms, and secondly, that they are using that space, that room of maneuver inside the budget to lower in 2015 with specific measures the taxation on households and on small and medium companies. And that has, in our opinion, to kickstart in 2015 again the European economy, because it's a stimulus by tax reduction of 200 billion Europe-wide, and it's a good bridge towards the first building block, that is the European Investment Fund, that shall be fully covered by private money, and that can be launched also in the coming months. Then I'm coming to the third point. All this has no sense if at the same time we are not opening the markets in key sectors where we're gonna do this in investments. And that's a precondition, naturally. If we don't open and unify these markets on digital and on energy and on telecom and the capital markets and a number of key markets and services, what then the effect of your investment shall be zero. And what is this implying, this third? That is that in the European Investment and Recovery Act, we shall take a number of initiatives on the side of regulation and legislation to open these markets. First of all, reducing the administrative burden with a goal of minus 10% towards 2017. That's one part of it, so the overall administrative burden, because it's one of the reasons why investment is low in Europe compared to other regions in the world. The next thing what is necessary, and maybe you are impressed by the slide, but maybe from time to time, Bram, you have to push on it. The next step is unify capital markets, an absolute necessity, because today, if you have, for example, some assets in one country, you cannot use them as collateral, as a mortgage, as a guarantee to obtain a credit in another, an investment credit in another country. So a real unification of our capital markets is also absolutely needed. Further, third point, completing the single market for goods and services also in difficult areas as education, as healthcare, where an enormous growth can be expected if we are doing that. It's the third point. And then next is the energy grid and all the investments needed in the energy market, where we need to go to a renewable figure of 27%, but that has only a chance if next to the energy grid we have also an opening of the markets. I give always the example of Spain. If we want to invest in interconnection in this energy grid between Spain and France, because it's completely stupid that in Spain we have a production of solar energy and an overproduction of solar energy cannot be stored. As you know, we have to export it, but it's not possible to export it to France, for example. Okay, we can solve that problem physically with an investment that is part of this project. But the question is, shall then the French change their regulation, open their market so that this energy can be used on that market? And if that answer to that second question is no, yeah, the investment has no sense at all, has no consequence. And we show you here, that's one of these missing links that we have, that's between Spain and France. But on gas, that are the missing links in blue, and in yellow, the missing links we have for the moment in electricity. So that makes a huge part of this plan and of this Recovery Act. Also putting money, that's the next slide, in an innovation project on storage of energy, what is of huge importance if we want to create this energy community inside the European Union. And then further on digital, exactly the same. I give you this slide to show you what the problem is today in Europe on digital, and the lack of investment in digital. That are the most important companies worldwide in the internet business, and that are the most important companies worldwide active in high-tech telecom and so on. You go really, Bram, I don't know what you have this morning, but you have drunk a strong coffee, possibly. And when you see that, yeah, the conclusion is very clear. There is one place in the world, in the middle, where these big companies are not. That is in Europe. You could say also in Africa, but also in Europe. That's the reality today. They are all American. They are all Asian. But they are not European, because we lack what? One digital market. It are still 28 supervisors, 28 regulators. If a company, a new company in Europe has found a new application on internet and they want to launch it in Europe, they need 28 authorizations and then 200 agreements with mobile operators to launch it in the European market. In the US, that same company that has a new application, they need one authorization. They need 3 or maximum 4 agreements with mobile operators to launch it. And that's the reason why all these Googles, Apples, Toshibas of the world are American and Asian and not longer European. So that's the reason why also in that third part, accelerating opening markets, we need to do something. That's the internet economy. The share of the internet economy, 3.8% in the European Union, lower than in the US, lower than in Japan, lower than in Korea. And that's the reason, that's the next slide, that in any way we need a huge investment, not of 5 or 6 billion as currently is on the table, but at least of 64 billion euro. And the 64 billion euro should be one of the key elements of this project funded by the European Union Investment Fund. And you know in what? In high-speed broadband access, in security, and so on. But that can only be done, and that's the next slide, if you do naturally one regulator, if you have one supervisor, if you unify these markets. And if we do that in digital, in capital markets, in energy, in the services, and with the lowering of the administrative burden of 10%, and doing also the same thing in transport, on trans-European networks, and in a number of new innovations like Revive the Galileo project, for example, that are the projects in which we want to invest. We need to invest in the next couple of years with this new fund that we have. So that maybe next slide, Bram. No, that's nothing. Thank you. So that was the end. Mainly, what we are saying with such an approach, a global approach, not starting to again all discussions about 2-pack and 6-pack and stability pact and I don't know what pact in the coming months, but by tackling the main problem, the investment gap, by creating new instruments and by creating a tax incentive. In 2015, we can kickstart the economy, but all this is only possible if in this package at the same time there is not only money, that's one element, but there is also new opening of the key markets in the Union. Otherwise, these investments shall not deliver the necessary positive results.